I was 17 when my own mom kicked me out of my house, all because it was my sister's big birthday party. Can you imagine? Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. That day started like any other. I was in my room, trying to finish homework, when my mom, Sharon, came in. She looked annoyed, then said something I'll never forget. "Clara, you need to leave. Bryn's birthday party is tonight, and there's no room for you here." I froze. 17 years, and I was just pushed out. Bryn, my golden sister, smiled like everything was normal. She didn't say a word to stop Mom. I stared at them both, feeling my chest tighten with betrayal. My small backpack felt heavier than ever as I walked out the door. The cold hit me first, then the shock. How could they treat me like this? I wandered down the street, not knowing where to go. The neighbor, Aunt Marla, saw me sitting on the curb and offered me a place for the night. I didn't want pity, but I needed shelter. I kept thinking about my mom and Bryn laughing, decorating, and enjoying the party I was banned from. That night, I realized something: I couldn't let this break me. If they thought pushing me out would hurt me forever, they were wrong. I would prove my worth, not by yelling or crying, but by standing up and succeeding on my own. One day, they would see that I was stronger than their favoritism, and I wouldn't need their approval to shine. The moment I stepped outside, the chill hit me harder than I expected. My backpack felt empty, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me. I couldn't believe my mom had actually done it, pushed me out like I didn't matter. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. I walked slowly toward the neighbor's yard, trying not to cry. My hands were numb, my stomach tight with anger and disbelief. How could the people who were supposed to love me treat me like this? I glanced back at the house. Through the window, I saw them laughing and moving around, decorating the living room. Bryn's face glowed with excitement, completely unaware, or maybe completely uncaring, of the pain they had caused me. Humiliation burned in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run back in and demand an explanation, but the fear of rejection froze me in place. The party music, the decorations, the laughter, it all felt like a slap in the face. I realized they didn't even see me as part of their world tonight. I sank onto the grass in the neighbor's yard, shivering and trying to hold back tears. Every laugh from inside felt like it was meant to mock me. My mind raced, questions I didn't have answers for, memories of all the times I'd been overlooked, compared, and pushed aside. Anger started to build under the shock, a quiet fire that promised I wouldn't forget this moment. As I sat there, staring at the warm lights through the window, one thought became clear: I couldn't change what they were doing now, but I could change how I responded. This betrayal wouldn't define me. I would rise above it, and one day, they would see that leaving me out didn't make them stronger, it made me stronger. I didn't know where to go, so I dialed Aunt Marla's number with trembling hands. She answered after a few rings, her voice cautious. I explained quickly, trying not to break down, that I had nowhere to stay. There was a pause, and then she sighed. "All right, Clara. You can come over for the night," she said. When I arrived, the door opened slowly, and I saw the weariness in her eyes. She didn't welcome me with warmth, only a quiet, uneasy nod. It hurt more than I expected. After Mom and Bryn's betrayal, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone anymore. But I was too tired and too cold to argue. I stepped inside, grateful for a roof over my head but wary of showing too much emotion. Sitting in her small living room, I wrapped myself in a blanket and watched the quiet hum of her house. Everything felt foreign, but safe in its own way. I couldn't help replaying the scene from earlier, the way Mom had sent me away without a second thought. The anger and hurt were still raw, but I felt something new too, a spark of determination. Being at Aunt Marla's made me realize I didn't need their approval to survive. I needed to prove that I wasn't weak, that being cast out didn't mean I was powerless. I decided I would focus on myself, on building a life where I was in control. I would not let anyone make me feel small again. That night, as I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, a quiet resolve settled over me. Mom and Bryn had underestimated me. They thought kicking me out would break me, but it had done the opposite. It lit a fire inside me I wasn't willing to let die. The next morning, I sat quietly at Aunt Marla's kitchen table, trying to make sense of everything. As I thought back, memories I had pushed aside began to surface. Small things I hadn't noticed before now felt like pieces of a larger picture. I remembered birthdays when Bryn always got the biggest gifts, while mine were smaller or late. I remembered Mom cheering louder at Bryn's school performances, praising her for every little thing, while I was barely acknowledged. I remembered being blamed for accidents or mistakes that weren't mine, while Bryn's missteps were overlooked. It hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't just about the party. This was the same story repeated for years. Bryn had always been the favored one, the golden child Mom wanted everyone to notice. And I had always been left behind, quietly carrying the weight of being invisible in my own home. Anger and hurt bubbled up as I realized how unfair everything had been. It wasn't just a single cruel moment, it was a pattern of favoritism that shaped my entire childhood. All the times I thought Mom was just tired or distracted, it was actually part of a deeper problem. Bryn's smiles, the gifts, the praise, they were never shared equally. Sitting there, staring out the window, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination. I had been wronged repeatedly, and it wasn't something I could ignore. I couldn't change the past, but I could take control of my future. I would not let their favoritism define me or hold me back. For the first time, I saw everything clearly. This was more than a single betrayal, it was a lifelong pattern. And now, I was ready to respond, not with tears, but with strength. In the quiet of Aunt Marla's spare room, I pulled out a notebook and a pen. The pages were blank, but my mind was overflowing. I didn't want to act on impulse or lash out in anger. That would only make me look weak. Instead, I needed a plan, something smart, something that would make them realize the cost of underestimating me. I began jotting down small ideas, things that could gradually shift the balance. I thought about school, about ways to show my abilities, and about proving I could succeed without their approval. Each note fueled a growing sense of control I hadn't felt in years. My anger became a tool, not a burden, sharpening my focus. I imagined scenarios where I quietly outshined Bryn, where Mom's favoritism wouldn't matter anymore. I didn't need to humiliate them openly. I just needed to create a reality where I was the one thriving while they watched. It was satisfying even to imagine it. I also thought about keeping my distance, observing their behavior, and collecting small reminders of how they treated me. Each memory became a lesson, a piece of strategy. I realized revenge wasn't about immediate satisfaction, it was about long-term proof, showing them that underestimating me had been their biggest mistake. Sitting there, pen in hand, I felt a rare sense of calm. For the first time since being kicked out, I wasn't just reacting, I was thinking ahead, planning. I could feel my confidence growing with every idea I wrote down. The betrayal had ignited something in me, and now I was ready to channel it carefully, smartly, and with purpose. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't desperate. I was preparing to show them that Clara wasn't someone they could dismiss. I threw myself into my schoolwork like never before. No one knew where I was staying, and I didn't tell a single soul about my plans. Every assignment, every project, I completed with care, making sure my work was flawless. It became my quiet rebellion, a way to prove that being pushed out hadn't broken me. Soon, teachers began to notice. My essays stood out. My presentations were confident and precise. I earned high grades on tests I hadn't even thought I could ace. It felt incredible to see my efforts recognized, even if no one at home would ever know. Without realizing it, I caught the attention of a scholarship committee for a program that could change my future. I submitted my application secretly, my heart racing as I imagined what it would mean if I got accepted. The thought of showing them I could succeed without their support gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. Meanwhile, I knew Mom and Bryn had no idea what I was achieving. They assumed I was struggling, that being kicked out had left me defeated. They didn't see the long hours I spent studying in Aunt Marla's spare room, the determination in every note I wrote, the care I put into every detail. The tension built quietly, like a storm forming. I didn't have to announce my progress. I just focused on excelling, letting my results speak for themselves. One day, when they finally realized what I had accomplished, the shock would be far more powerful than any words I could ever say. For now, I thrived in secret, feeding on the quiet knowledge that my first step toward taking control of my life, and showing them the truth, was already working. I went back to the house using a simple excuse. I said I needed to return something that had been left behind. The door opened slowly, and nothing inside felt welcoming. The air was heavy, tense in a way I hadn't noticed before. Mom spoke in a soft voice that sounded caring on the surface, but I could hear the pressure underneath. She kept reminding Bryn of expectations, of sacrifices made, of how much was owed. It wasn't kindness, it was control wrapped in guilt. Bryn nodded quietly, her confidence weaker than I remembered. No one asked how I was doing. No one noticed the calm in my voice or the strength in my posture. They assumed I was still struggling, still lost. I stood there, unseen again, holding victories they couldn't imagine. As I listened, I realized something important. The same tactics used on me were now tightening around Bryn. Praise came with strings attached. Love was conditional. Watching it unfold gave me clarity instead of pain. I understood that what happened to me wasn't personal, it was habitual. Mom continued talking, directing every thought, shaping every choice. Bryn barely spoke for herself. I stayed quiet, not out of fear, but awareness. I saw the pattern clearly now, and it no longer had power over me. When I left, nothing dramatic happened. No arguments. No tears. Just understanding. Walking away from that house felt different this time. I wasn't escaping, I was choosing distance with purpose. That visit strengthened my resolve more than any argument could have. I knew I was doing the right thing by building a life separate from manipulation and silence. They remained unaware of my progress, and I decided to keep it that way. My strength didn't need their recognition. As I stepped outside, I felt grounded. Whatever came next, I would face it with clear eyes, firm boundaries, and confidence earned the hard way. I began writing everything down in a private journal, not out of anger, but for clarity. Dates, moments, decisions that had once confused me now made sense when placed side by side. Patterns appeared clearly. What felt random before was deliberate when viewed over time. I remembered times when opportunities were redirected, when praise shifted away from me, when excuses were made to favor someone else. I recorded each instance carefully, keeping my emotions separate from the facts. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. When the journal was full, I didn't hide it. I chose to speak with adults who actually listened. I met with guidance counselors and mentors who had watched my progress quietly. I shared my experiences calmly, explaining how unequal treatment had shaped my path and forced early independence. They didn't interrupt. They didn't doubt me. Instead, they asked thoughtful questions and encouraged me to continue speaking. For the first time, my experiences were acknowledged without judgment. What once felt like personal failure was recognized as unfair imbalance. That validation changed everything. My past pain became proof of resilience rather than weakness. The records I kept showed maturity, awareness, and preparation. I wasn't blaming anyone, I was explaining how I learned to survive unequal expectations. Each conversation strengthened my confidence. I realized I no longer needed approval from home. Respect came from those who saw my effort and growth. The documentation wasn't a weapon, it was a foundation. Walking away from those meetings, I felt empowered. I had transformed quiet suffering into purpose. What once hurt deeply now supported my future. I wasn't trapped by old roles anymore. By choosing honesty and preparation over silence, I reclaimed control of my story. No one could rewrite it for me again. By the time I turned 18, I had saved enough to rent a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I signed the lease with trembling hands, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through me. For the first time, I felt fully responsible for myself, free from Mom and Bryn's control. I started a part-time job at a local bookstore. The hours were long, but I loved the independence it gave me. Every paycheck I earned felt like proof that I could survive, thrive even, without relying on anyone who had once abandoned me. I decorated my apartment slowly, turning the empty space into a home that reflected me, not them. As I settled into this new life, whispers started reaching Mom and Bryn through people we both knew. "Claire is doing really well on her own," someone would mention casually, and I imagined the sting of their jealousy. They had assumed I would struggle, that leaving me out of their lives would keep me down. Instead, I was flourishing quietly, building a life that was completely mine. Hearing about their regret through the grapevine didn't give me pleasure in a mean way, it was satisfaction in knowing that I had proven my worth without needing their validation. Each day, my confidence grew. I was no longer the girl who waited for approval or feared rejection. I was independent, capable, and determined to make my own path. That apartment, my job, my small successes, they were more than milestones. They were my rebellion, my statement that I could rise without their support. For the first time, I felt untouchable, and the realization that Mom and Bryn were watching quietly from afar made my triumph even sweeter. I spent hours thinking about how I would face Mom and Bryn. I didn't want to yell or cry. That would only let them see me as weak, the same way they had always treated me. Instead, I needed control, calmness, and precision. I wrote down every point I wanted to make. Each word was chosen carefully, aimed at revealing the favoritism I had endured, the way I had been overlooked, and how they had underestimated me for years. I practiced speaking slowly, letting each sentence carry weight, imagining their faces as they heard the truth. I thought about timing too. I didn't want anyone else around to distract from what I was saying. This confrontation had to be private, focused, and meaningful. I rehearsed in front of a mirror, watching how my expressions could communicate strength without anger. Every glance, every pause, was part of the plan. As I prepared, I remembered all the small betrayals from my childhood, birthday parties, school achievements, moments when Bryn's success was celebrated and mine ignored. Those memories fueled my words, giving them precision. This wasn't just about one incident anymore, it was about decades of neglect and favoritism, finally being pointed out clearly. The more I practiced, the calmer I felt. My anger was still there, but it had transformed into determination. I wasn't seeking revenge in the messy, emotional way. I wanted them to understand, to feel the impact of their choices. I wanted them to realize that every slight, every unfair moment, had shaped me, but it had also made me stronger. By the time I finished rehearsing, I was ready. Not vengeful, not desperate, just prepared. The confrontation would not be chaos. It would be clarity, truth, and the quiet power of someone who refused to be ignored any longer. I walked through the front door, my heart steady but my mind sharp. The family event was in full swing, laughter and chatter filling the rooms, but I felt none of the nerves that had haunted me in the past. I was ready. Mom looked surprised to see me standing there, and Bryn froze mid-laugh. I didn't rush or shout. I took a deep breath and began, my voice calm but firm. I told them about the years of being overlooked, the moments I had been pushed aside, and the favoritism that had followed me like a shadow throughout my life. Their reactions were immediate. Mom's face drained of color, her eyes filling with guilt she couldn't hide. Bryn opened her mouth, but no words came out. I continued, laying out the pain, the humiliation, and the quiet strength I had built in response. Every sentence was deliberate, exposing their mistakes without yelling, without losing control. I could see it sinking in. Mom's shoulders slumped, the weight of realization pressing down on her. Bryn's confident facade cracked, replaced with shock and something like fear. They had assumed I would crumble, that I would beg for their attention or approval, but I didn't. I ended my words and waited. Silence stretched through the room. Finally, Mom stammered, her voice soft and trembling, asking if I could forgive her. Bryn followed, voice barely audible, echoing the same question. I stood tall, looking at them both. I didn't smile, but I didn't falter. The power had shifted. They were the ones pleading now, and I was the one who had learned to protect myself. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not as the overlooked daughter, but as someone who had endured, survived, and risen above their mistakes. After the confrontation, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I could see the shame on Mom's face and the confusion in Bryn's eyes, and it gave me a quiet satisfaction. I didn't need to mock or punish them. Their own guilt and surprise were enough to show that I had changed the balance of power. I gathered my things calmly, moving with a sense of purpose I had never felt as a teenager. Each step out of the house felt like a claim of my independence, a declaration that I was no longer under their control. I wasn't leaving in anger, I was leaving with clarity and strength. As I stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter. I realized that all the fear, hurt, and betrayal I had carried had transformed into resilience. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge my growth, I could see it in myself. I had built a life, learned to stand up for myself, and earned respect through determination and patience. The best part was the subtle power of their humility. Mom's and Bryn's attempts to control me had failed. They had expected tears or excuses, but instead, I had walked away confident, unshaken, and composed. Watching them absorb the reality of my strength without me having to raise my voice was deeply satisfying. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my life. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. I was respected, capable, and free. That sense of accomplishment, of knowing I had risen above the years of neglect and favoritism, filled me with a quiet joy that no one could take away. I left the house not broken, not bitter, but triumphant, embracing the independence I had fought so hard to claim. Sitting alone in my apartment that evening, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The events of the past years replayed in my mind, but instead of pain, I felt clarity. Every disappointment, every moment of being overlooked, had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more determined than I had ever been. I thought about the trust one had given so freely, the way I had believed in my family even when they let me down. I forgave myself for that. It wasn't weakness, it was part of learning, part of growing. Betrayal had been harsh, but it had taught me resilience and self-worth in a way nothing else could. Looking around my apartment, I saw the life I had built, small victories, milestones, and quiet achievements. Each one reminded me that I was capable of standing on my own, that I didn't need validation from anyone who had once doubted me. The past could no longer hold me back. I reflected on Mom and Bryn, feeling neither anger nor bitterness. Their choices had revealed who they were, and I had risen above them. I had found peace not by seeking revenge, but by claiming my independence and embracing my own success. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my future. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready for them. I had learned to trust myself, to act with confidence, and to prioritize my own growth. As I looked out the window at the city lights, a sense of triumph settled over me. I was no longer the overlooked child. I was Clara, resilient, empowered, and free, and I was ready to face the world on my own terms, with hope, strength, and a quiet, unstoppable confidence. Do you think I made the right choice by standing up to my mom and sister, or should I have forgiven them sooner? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.